one.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the continuing conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas is Len Carter. Len is an investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Welcome back. It's Wednesday, 6:30. And I'm delighted to be back with my precious listeners and participants in this podcast. You all make it much better than it would be without your presence, and I really appreciate your participation and your comments that help me become wiser still. So thank you for joining me, and let's get started. Before we deal with the issues that we're going to discuss today, you got some note about that, about our specific issues today. We're always trying to deal with the most current and meaningful events of the moment. So, but one issue that I want to deal with every time, because I want to make sure that all of you have a happier life. Not a high, not like you're happy from drugs or LSD or something, but happiness from serenity, from peace, from relaxation, from avoidance of tension and stress, because tension and stress are the major source of most illnesses. Most illnesses are not like a cold or a flu or a contagious disease. It's ones that we impose on ourselves. So part of the reason I wrote this book, Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back, and How to Be Happy No Matter What, is to make people happier. We in this country, we have so many people that find it necessary to go and fentanyl? No, and all kind of different drugs, and suffer from things that come from aggravation and tension and stress, like ulcers, migraines, arthritis, all of the psychosomatic illnesses, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. It's all comes from stress. You say, well, why do some people get ulcers and some people get migraines and others get ulcerative colitis, etc.? And what it does is it hits all of us, each of us in a different way. It's like whatever's our weakest link in our body, it's that part of our body that suffers the consequences of stress and tension. So how do you avoid that? There's one thing that I'll tell you that's for sure, that any goal that you have in life that you decide to fulfill, to accomplish, you have to make a note of it. You have to focus on it. You should write it down, because you'd never get, if you started out on a trip and you didn't put down the final destination and just drove and drove and drove, you don't know where you get to. So when you're dealing with happiness, you got to put that down. Happiness, the absence of stress, the absence of tension, the absence of worry that you yourself bring about by letting your mind think about negative things that aren't even current, negative things that happened in the past. So write down, right from this moment on, write down that your goal is to be happy, and anything that intrudes on that goal, like letting your mind wander into aggravating disappointments of the past or even of the present, or tragedies that you suffered or losses that you suffered. Anytime you go there, as I told you, get away from that. Shift gears right away. And as I told you in the past, there are lots of ways you can shift gears. There's some that are very obvious, like for me, I told you what I do is when I go through some of this aggravation or anxiety about something that's going on now or some disappointment or loss in the past, I shift gears and I either watch a movie that I hear is great, or I read a book that I was told was very absorbing and very inspiring, or I read a biography that is likewise inspiring and uplifting, or I go visit a friend, a best friend, who I always enjoy being with, and who lifts me up, and I lift him up. And one of the quickest things for me is I run downstairs to the freezer, and I get a big scoop of Haagen-Dazs chocolate ice cream, or Breyer's chocolate ice cream, and put some chocolate syrup on it, and a bunch of whipped cream. It looks so pretty, and sometimes chopped nuts and maraschino cherry. And the minute I take the first bite into it, even just looking at it, it's so encouraging for me and uplifting that I get off what I was thinking about, and I concentrate on the fun that I'm having, on the joy that I'm having from this ice cream sundae. But whatever works for you, but shift gears. Get away from negative thoughts. Because really what we do is nobody punishes us as much as we punish ourselves. Because nobody's with us 24/7 and controls our mind 24/7. So remember that. Don't indulge, don't tolerate negative thoughts. Be happy, don't worry, and you will be. If you make up your mind, and also it'll be a big help for you if you get a copy of Happiness Guaranteed, this very book, or your misery back, because I'm not just saying that as an opinion. I'm saying that because the feedback I've gotten from so many people, it's people that only have it a few weeks, say it's changed their life, it's changed their attitude, and attitude is everything. If you got the right attitude and you won't let you punish yourself, you're going to be happy. If you have any trouble, you can call me, or you can, if you're unhappy with the book. So far, I haven't found anybody that hasn't praised it and raved about it, more than raved about it, how much it's impacted their lives. But if you're not happy, I promise not only to return your purchase price, but double your purchase price. Just save the purchase slip with what you paid, and I'm so sure you love it. But if you don't, I'm willing to bet and lose money on it. So keep that in mind. Happiness Guaranteed. One page, 365 pages with inspirational, uplifting ideas and thoughts and behavior patterns that you can use every day of your life. So God bless you. I love you. And the only reason I give this lecture about happiness is because I want you to be happy, elated, comfortable, relaxed, get reinvigorated. Every kind of thing that you can live a better life. So with that, we'll move on to the things that will probably aggravate you.
We might have to stop for some Haagen-Dazs in the middle.
That's true.
If we get too aggravated.
Yeah, you get your Haagen-Dazs.
Get it ready.
Get your Sunday ready. Because
you may need a big bowl.
Right, the subject was
2 scoops.
Discussing today. It can be very aggravating.
We've heard of a 2-state solution. This Haagen-Dazs is a 2-scoop solution.
Right. And today I'm delighted again to have Len Carter on the podcast with me. He's a genius. That's why I keep having him back. He, like me, he graduated at the top of his class at Harvard Business School. I'm almost ashamed to admit that I went to Harvard. I used to be so proud to say it, but the way they've been treating the Jewish kids and Israel and I can't believe that with the intelligence they collectively supposedly have, that they could have tolerated this kind of punishing behavior, the biased behavior, inconsiderate, at the very least, inconsiderate behavior. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. You want to get started, Lennon?
We wanted to talk about the now entering the 4th month of the conflict in Israel and the Gaza Strip. I think before we did, there were a couple of little Instagram and videos you wanted to play. Do you want to start with one of those, and then as sort of by way of introduction?
Right. At least these are uplifting. The rest is going to be depressing.
All right.
Why don't we play that?
The first is a little piece by Bill Maher a couple of weeks back, comedian on HBO. So,
controlled by the Palestinian Authority. In 1950, the little town of Bethlehem was 86% Christian. Now it's overwhelmingly Muslim. And that's my point tonight. Things change. To 2.3 billion Christians, there can be no more sacred site than where their Savior was born. But they don't have it anymore. And yet no Crusader army has geared up to take it back. Things change. Countries, boundaries, empires. Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, but today an ottoman is something you put under your feet. The city of Byzantium became the city of Constantinople, became Istanbul. Not everybody liked it, but you can't keep arguing the call forever. The Irish had the entire island to themselves, but the British were starting an empire, and, well, the Irish lost their tip. They blew each other up over it for 30 years, but eventually everybody comes to an accommodation, except the Palestinians. Was it unjust that even a single Arab family was forced to move upon the founding of the Jewish state? Yes, but it's also not rare, happening all through history, all over the world, and mostly what people do is make the best of it. After World War II, 12 million ethnic Germans got shoved out of Russia and Poland and Czechoslovakia because being German had become kind of unpopular. 1 million Greeks were shoved out of Turkey in 1923, 1 million Ghanaians out of Nigeria in 1983, almost 1 million French out of Algeria in 1962. Nearly 1 million Syrian refugees moved to Germany 8 years ago. Was that a perfect fit? And no one knows more about being pushed off land than the Jews, including being almost wholly kicked out of every Arab country they once lived in. Yes, TikTok fans, ethnic cleansing happens both ways. In Fiddler on the Roof, the family is always moving to stay one step ahead of the Cossacks, but they deal with it. When they're leaving Anatevka, they say, hey, it wasn't so great anyway. Come on. Like other countries don't have roofs you could fiddle on. Now, that's not how they really felt, but they were coping. They coped, because sometimes that's all you can do. History is brutal, and humans are not good people. History is sad and full of wrongs, but you can't make them unhappen, because a paraglider isn't a time machine. People get moved, and yes, colonized. Nobody was a bigger colonizer than the Muslim army that swept out of the Arabian desert and took over much of the world in a single century. And they didn't do it by asking. There's a reason Saudi Arabia's flag is a sword. Kosovo was the cradle of Christian Serbia. Then it became Muslim. They fought a war about it in the 90s, but stopped. They didn't keep it going for 75 years. There were deals on the table to share the land called Palestine in 1947, 93, 95, 98, 2000, 2008, and East Jerusalem could have been the capital of a Palestinian state that today might look more like Dubai than Gaza. Arafat was offered 95% of the West Bank and said no. The Palestinian people should know your leaders and the useful idiots on college campuses who are their allies are not doing you any favors by keeping alive the river to the sea myth. I mean, where do you think Israel is going? Spoiler alert, nowhere. It's one of the most powerful countries in the world with a $500 billion economy, the world's second largest tech sector after Silicon Valley, and nuclear weapons. They're here. They like their bagel with a schmear. Get used to it. What's happening to Palestinians today is horrible, and not just in Gaza, in the West Bank, too. But wars end with negotiation. And what the media glosses over is it's hard to negotiate when the other side's bargaining position is you all die and disappear. I mean, the chant from the river to the sea. Yeah, let's look at the map. Here's the river. Here's the sea. Oh, I see. It means you get all of it. Not just the West Bank, which was basically the original UN partition deal you rejected because you wanted all of it and always have, even though it's indisputably also the Jews' ancestral homeland. And so you attacked and lost, and attacked again and lost, and attacked again and lost. As my friend Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you? Look at what Mexico used to own, all the way up to the top of California. But no Mexican is out there chanting from the Rio Grande to Portland, Oregon. Because they chose a different path. They got real and built a country that's the world's 14th biggest economy now. Because they knew the United States wasn't going to give back Phoenix any more than Hamas will ever be in Tel Aviv. One of the leaders of Hamas says, save yourselves time and imaginary dreams. In a few years, Allah willing, you will have to discuss the situation in the region after Israel. I'm sorry, who's the one with imaginary dreams? If I give you the benefit of the doubt and say your plan for a completely Jewless Palestine isn't that all the Jews should die, what is the only other option? They move. You move all the Jews. Okay, I got to warn you, there's going to be some kvetching. You move all the Jews, and we do this with what? A fleet of trucks called Jew-Haul? And to where are we moving this entire country? Texas? Sure, they have room, and I guess we could put the Wailing Wall on the border and kill two birds with one stone. Or we could just get serious.
And I hope to have it up in a few seconds.
That's why, by the way, you have the situation in the Gaza. You have all the international idiots telling the Israelis they have to withdraw. And then what happens? You give the Palestinians a statelet, and they give you Hamas and war. Anyone who thinks the West Bank is going to be a Palestinian state is now living with the fairies. And it's not because of the Israelis. It's because the Palestinian Authority hasn't wished to create a state for decades. It never did. It's only ever been interested in creating a state from the river to the sea, as they always say. It's never been interested in a two-state solution. Palestinian Authority, under two leaders now, has repeatedly turned down every Israeli offer of peace. They were offered 99% of what they wanted just 15 years ago. They turned it down again, as Yasser Arafat did at Oslo. They don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution, and that's a Jewish-cleared Palestinian state.
There you have it.
Okay, so that's by way of background. So let's start with something that I thought was interesting because it's a contrast in Netanyahu's position a couple of years ago versus today. So in 2020, and as we know, Donald Trump and Netanyahu were very close, and Donald Trump tried to come up with a deal, to solve the conflict, and his solution was a two-state solution, and my understanding was that Netanyahu and his ambassador actually had a role in formulating exactly what that would be, along with Trump and his people. And at the time, Netanyahu supported that solution. So today, and that was in 2020, so a few years later today, his position is no, we can't have a two-state solution. So how was it that then he supported that, and yet now today, see what you think. He does say you can't. Well, let me see. What do you think? What's the what? It's not like the view of what Palestinians have wanted or not wanted over the years has changed. I mean, we see that this is a view that has been around a long time. Presumably, if Netanyahu didn't believe Palestinians wanted a two-state solution in 2020, why was he supporting it then?
Well, if you look back on the history, only from 48, when Israel was created as a Jewish state, supposedly a Jewish state means it was proposed as one where the Jews could run it, could live in security, some kind of safety, have their own defense, and so forth. Ever since then, there have been numerous attempts by Israel, and they've given up. First, with Egypt, they made a deal. They gave up the Sinai with Jordan. They made a deal. They've had peace ever since. They've had peace with Egypt ever since. With Lebanon, they gave back some small part of the border that was in dispute. And they've made a number of proposals, not only by Netanyahu, by his predecessor, Omid, had multiple meetings with the PLO and made all kind of offers. And it's clear that they want a one-state solution. They want one state that excludes Israel and the Jews. As a matter of fact, in the doctrine of Hamas in Gaza, and similar attitude persists in the PLO in the West Bank, they state specifically their goal is to wipe out Israel and kill all the Jews. Now, how do you make a deal? It's true, the only one you could ever make a deal with in a war is your enemy. So we made a deal with Japan after the Second World War. We made a deal with Germany. But you can't make a deal with somebody that says, we want you off to the face of the earth. And the Jews throughout the world, they want.
But that was the case in 2020. I mean, there's no new, the PLA hasn't changed. The Palestinians haven't changed since 2020. So Netanyahu in 2020 knew that. He knew that the river to the sea chant was still...
I'm saying he's not the only one.
But why in 2020 would he support the Trump solution?
He thought it was possibly doable.
Why would he think that? If every time up to 2020 it didn't work, why in 2020 would he think?
What glows eternal. And under Trump, he thought that Trump would help. What Israel wants most is security. They could take care of all the rest. They built a great economy. They built a great country that was practically a desert when they first came in, and they developed the leading water development. I was in China, and there were a bunch of Israelis there in Beijing, and I said, what are all these Israelis doing in Beijing, China? And some young lady who I took public company, a brilliant young lady who studied Chinese at Columbia. She was always in love with Columbia. Her and a girlfriend moved to China, and she explained to me that they're consultants for China on taking the salt water out of the ocean. What do they call that?
Desalinization.
Desalinization. That Israel's the leading country in the world, the leading knowledge source for desalinizing water. And the second thing is they also took land that was dry and barren and almost desert-like, and through what's it called?
Irrigation.
Irrigation, yeah, advanced irrigation. So they were also advising the Chinese on irrigation, how to improve their production of food, fruits and vegetables and everything. So Israel isn't looking for help in technology. They're the leader in technology. After the United States in the world, they're the leader on NASDAQ, which has all the... NASDAQ is the stock exchange that has overwhelmingly the vast majority of high-tech companies. And Israel's number 3. Number 1 is the United States. Number 2 is Canada. And number 3 is Israel. And Israel is really number 2 because it's the United States, in terms of technology, It's the United States and Israel, because Canada is qualified by virtue of the fact that it has a great deal of mines and natural resources that are great and helpful to the whole world, but they're still not anywhere near being the leaders of high tech. So a tiny country like Israel, they win Nobel Prizes. It's just unbelievable. And also, it should be pointed out that the Jews were adaptive. They were thrown out literally from all these Arab Muslim countries that they occupied for not for years, for centuries. And what today is Iran, it used to be called Persia. The Hebrew Talmud was written in that country. Much of it is in Arabic. They were very active and living great lives in Iraq. They were never very big in Saudi Arabia, but in so many of these countries, they had a Jewish population that was there for a long time, even though in many of these countries they didn't let Jews have schools, Hebrew schools, or synagogues, or any symbols of their religion. And even in Israel before 48, when Jordan controlled what is now Israel, I wanted to go visit, and I couldn't visit the holy places, the Temple Wall, or any part of Israel that had all of the historical things that we as Jews cherish and venerate. And so once Israel became a state, they allowed for the Muslims to come in and attend to their or to visit their holy places. They even gave them, when they won the Temple Mount, Israel won that in 1967. Moshe Dayan, the general, said, let's give it to the Muslims, to the Arabs, so they'll appreciate how forthcoming we are. And they did give it to them. And till this day, they don't allow Jews to come up there to pray. And there's not one word in the Quran about the Temple Mount. So I don't know why. Probably because it's a values to the Jews that they designated it as a holy place for the Muslims. Muhammad never talked about it. And the Christians likewise can come to any place, practice any religion, build churches. The Muslims can build mosques. It's a different world. It's wide open. If you're Hindu, you can build a temple there. So when you say Netanyahu wanted to find a way to avoid this perennial war and this perennial negative impact, a torture of Jewish people by the Palestinians. It wasn't that he was so enthused about having a second state, but he was willing and demonstrated by the concessions they made along the way. I don't know of any concessions that the Palestinians made. They've had meetings. They had where it was supposed to be a real big deal, the Oslo agreement. I don't know what Israel got out of the Oslo agreement. I think maybe that the Palestinians in West Bank could have their own police force and so forth. But I don't, so Israel's been at least forthcoming through its prime ministers and through its Knesset, even though there's a bunch of right-wing Israelis that are totally against that. They said it was the Jewish homeland, and we shouldn't even be giving up any part of it. But it was adaptive. It was trying to avoid what we have now in Gaza: Israeli soldiers and being killed, young men that have great possibilities for their future.
I mean, it's definitely true that if there were a truly recognized Palestinian state that had the, authority to make treaties with other countries, to have unfettered trade with other countries, that you would see a lot of influence from a lot of the other hostile countries, particularly Iran, getting a footing into those countries. So I do agree that's a key reason why, from a practical point of view, it's not possible. What about this idea you hear bandied around sometimes of a demilitarized Palestinian state? Is that even possible?
It's very hard to have a demilitarized state. Once you're a state, once you're a country, you can insist, look, we're a country, every other country in the world has their own police force, their own army. And more than that, just because you sign on to be demilitarized, you can still, you're now a state, and you can buy equipment, and you could get other allies to support you, and you could still have what you have now in Gaza. Israel gave up Gaza. They had to take their own Israeli people, their own Jewish people that had businesses there, and what do you call the things where they grow it under the hothouses?
Greenhouses.
Greenhouses. They had big businesses, and they were very reluctant and resistant to leaving, even though Israel said, oh, we're going to turn it over to the Palestinians and to the Muslims, without any thing that Israel got in advance, without any conditions, without any promises. And they even had to send in the Israeli IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli army, to kick out their own people because they didn't want to leave. So, look, over 1 million Jews, maybe more, were kicked out of all these Arab countries that had Jews for generations, millenniums. And Israel, a tiny country, absorbed them all. Interestingly, not one Arab country has offered to take in Palestinians. From 1948, at the time that Israel entered and became a state, it had no army, no government yet in place, nothing. 7 countries, I believe it was 7 different countries: Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt,
Iraq.
7 different countries attacked Israel, and in many cases told the Palestinian occupants, just take off. We don't want you to get involved or get hurt in the war, or and we'll beat these armyless Israelis, because it had no formal army. It had a lot of help from former GIs from the United States. and throughout Jews throughout the world, but it had no standing army, and it beat all these 7 countries. But they were told that they could come back and get even the territory or the land, the resources that the Israelis had at that time, or the Jews. They weren't yet Israelis. For the Jewish people, they were Israelis back for hundreds of years. On Passover, we sing next year in Jerusalem. It's the hope and the prayer and the love for that place, because we had our temple there. We were born in that part of the world, all the way back to Abraham. And we took in over 1 million Russians. We took in everybody, and there was a group that left, a large group of Palestinians left, and went to Lebanon temporarily, and they built a camp for them to stay at. And to this day, they've grown in population tremendously because they have a lot of children, these Muslims in Lebanon. So it's grown into a major population, Palestinian population. And Lebanon won't integrate them into their society. They're still in that temporary camp. So it shows you Israel, a tiny country, took in 1 million Russians, 1 million or more Jews from throughout the Middle East. They took in a bunch of, they say Israel's apartheid and bias and so forth. They took in a bunch of Jewish Ethiopians, and they were overwhelmingly black. So Israel's been a real democracy, and it has not foreclosed any group from participating, from settling there. They're even members of the parliament, of the Knesset.
Yep. So if you're Netanyahu, you're 4 months into the war. Really, according to their own estimates, like 70% of Hamas's fighting force is still intact. They really haven't killed or captured any of the senior Hamas leaders in Gaza. And, he's starting to get pressure to resolve. Last week, a group of people representing the families of the 100 hostages left stormed the Knesset, demanding for, some kind of, some action, some resolution or something. Even by Netanyahu's own admission, the complete victory that he's said would ultimately prevail is still a long way off. So, what do you do? And politically, he's, polls in Israel show he's not terribly popular. He'd probably lose an election if it were held.
Undoubtedly.
What do you do?
Well,
and then he by saying we can never have a two-state solution, he gives the world further ammunition to say, look at that.
Yeah,
see,
Israel has been hurt politically throughout the world. One of the only.
even if there's no two-state solution, don't say that. If Israel could be guaranteed, as you said, guaranteed security, would they go for a two-state solution? Probably, right? So all he has to do is say, if we could be guaranteed.
It's hard for anybody to guarantee.
Well, of course, but then you never get it.
No, but I don't know. Our government spends billions of dollars on intelligence, the CIA, the FBI, numerous, the Defense Department. They all have intelligence, and they never seem to know anything in advance. They didn't know about the Yom Kippur War, where there were UN troops on the border, and they went right through the UN troops. And just this week we found out, and I knew that all along because I'm aware of what's going on in the Gaza. I'm aware that it's one of the recipients. I think it's the recipient.
Some of the UN people were involved?
Of more UN money.
Yeah.
Of UN money and support than any other nation. That's my impression. They have 80% unemployment. They don't build their own country. They don't build their own people, And so it's impossible to deal with a group that won't.
It may be, but don't say that. Because then you just give the other side exactly what they want, to point to you and say, "See, we want a two-state solution." Of course, they really don't, but they say we do.
Well, I told you it's in their charter.
Hamas charter, not in the PLA charter, but
it's just that Hamas, articulates it in a charter, but the Palestinians are attacking.
Well, in action, Palestinians, the West Bank PLA espouses it through action.
Yeah.
They don't need a charter.
And so many Palestinians that have jobs in Israel and that participate in life in Israel, vote in the Israeli elections, come forth and testify that their life has been very wonderful in Israel. They went to colleges there, they went to school there, they have great jobs there.
So there's two things I've heard floating around as possible deals or solutions. One is that Israel proposed that the Hamas senior leaders could leave Gaza as part of a broader ceasefire. Is that a good idea? And the other one is that Israel's proposed a 2-month ceasefire in exchange for release of the hostages. So do you think either of those what would happen if you let all the senior Hamas leaders out? I guess they could just come back. I don't know if how would that work? I don't see how that works. They sneak back in. You'd have to very tightly occupy the country.
It's a kind of inducement.
That's not going to work.
Inducement to cooperate with Israel in some manner, shape, or form. But
and then do you give them 2 months if they give back all the hostages? Not stop. Just give them 2 months.
Israel is fighting with sort of one arm or two arms behind their backs, because the hostages, other nations that have lose hostages during the war, that's part of war. They accept it. With Israel, they have to be, Netanyahu has to be, because they're in front of his house and in front of the Knesset.
In the Knesset.
Yeah, they invaded the Knesset, the parliament.
Yeah.
Saying they got to get that. So the primary thing now became, what do we do about the hostages? And not only that, one of the proposals was unbelievable, that for every hostage that Hamas will return, they want 1,000 prisoners. So, and they got it in the past. For one soldier that was in captivity, or that the Israelis, that the Hamas had, Israel gave them over 1,000, 1,040 or some prisoners. So, when you care about, it's so sad that Israel has no PR. Most of the world, and certainly the young people that protest at Harvard and these other institutions, Penn and MIT, and almost everywhere, Berkeley. It's horrendous, including Jewish kids, because they don't have any knowledge of all of what we've just talked about, and they think, well, Israel's killing people. Israel didn't start the war, and they're just responding to the attack where they lost 1,400 non-military, non-belligerent civilians on the first day. And how do you respond to that? Particularly since they've had wars with Hamas, I think in 2014, three or more times, and it's never over. So Bibi is saying, Netanyahu's saying, once and for all, we got to end it. But how do you end it when the whole world is, including its major ally, from which it is very dependent, at least in acquiring some arms and funds? When the whole world is pushing them to look at the United States as remiss even now. Today I read that 3 American soldiers were killed and dozens of Americans were wounded by Iran proxies. And it's inconceivable that we don't go after the head of the snake, because we know that it's Iran that's doing it, and he just ignores it, and it doesn't stop. And they're jeopardizing the economies of the whole world.
So let's talk about that.
So it's going to lead to a jump in inflation again, because so much of the stuff comes through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea.
So what should, Biden did say that there would be retaliation for those soldiers in northern Jordan near Syria being killed.
He says it, but he doesn't do it.
What should the reaction be? Should it be
attack Iran?
He should attack Tehran directly.
Yeah.
In what form?
As aggressively as feasible. I don't think we should hit him with an atom bomb, but we certainly should seek to overthrow the Khamenei and the government, because they're vicious. They say,
So that would take troops. That would take an invasion, a troop invasion. You're not going to overthrow a government without bringing boots to the ground.
Well, but by doing nothing, they're inviting more belligerency, again, more feeling of strength on the part of Russia, on the part of China. China's talking now about taking back Taiwan, because of they see that when you're attacked and you don't respond, it looks like we're a paper army. We got all this equipment and everything. We're the number one defense. We spend more than almost the whole rest of the world combined on offensive equipment, on defensive equipment, on arms, and we do nothing. So you don't have to be a genius to read that the United States is, under Biden, is now.
So you think we should overthrow Iran the way we overthrew Iraq? Send troops in, and then we'd have to occupy the country, rebuild we'd have to occupy it.
You have to do whatever you have to do. We went into Afghanistan when they never even did anything that's bad as that.
But I think Iraq is a better example, because that was a government overthrown and then an occupation for many years at a cost to the U.S. of trillions of dollars. I mean, I'm not saying that's
better
not a
than-
solution, but
Is
that's
a better example than Afghanistan?
yeah, because
Afghanistan didn't attack the United States, didn't take over as Iraq did Kuwait. They've done nothing.
no, but for whatever the reason,
No, I'm saying we attacked unilaterally Afghanistan because of the 3,000 people killed
So-
on 9/11.
and what about Iraq?
Iraq never attacked anything.
No, but we
in the
went in
United
and
States.
overthrew the government and then occupied the country.
Yeah,
So
under false pretenses.
Right. So in this case,
There was no.
in this case, how do you know for sure that Iran is behind it?
Oh, everybody knows. That's no secret. There
Well,
are proxies. Yemen.
But a proxy
Yemen
doesn't mean that it was ordered by Tehran to overthrow a country because you think they ordered the attack.
They say it. America's the devil. What the
But
Satan,
they didn't say they ordered this attack.
They don't say it.
Right.
But America's the Satan.
All right.
Israel's the small Satan. The United States
I
the
know
large
that.
Satan.
But that's
Satan.
but do you overthrow a country and then occupy
all
it
day
because
long,
of that?
They're saying, we got to wipe out America. They don't just.
So any country that says we have to wipe out America, you
but
should overthrow?
They're demonstrating it because they know all of the weaponry that Yemen is using comes from Iran. It's a tiny country with no production of anything. And the same with Lebanon, all the missiles they have, all the things that they're shooting every day and sending over Israel, and all the bombing of the ships going through the, where I think as if some, what do you call it, a kid at school that's beating up
Bully.
we're acting as a bully is beating up on
And yet we should let Russia
on-
take over Ukraine.
I don't know what we should do about Ukraine, but I would say this, that the whole world isn't screaming about Ukraine as that, stop the fighting for a while, stop. It's just, as what the one fellow said, Israel is the only country that's not allowed to win a war, even though they didn't start it. Ukraine was likewise didn't start it either, but.
All right, so we're just about out of time because that was a lot to pack in there.
We're not out of aggravation.
Yes, we are definitely not out of it. Time runs out long before aggravation runs out. But we will.
There's no easy solution because
if there were,
they still have 80% of the tunnels. How do you get rid of the tunnels when the Israelis can't even blow them up because
they have hostages in them?
Supposedly, they have hostages in them.
It's not because they couldn't destroy the tunnels. They would be easy to destroy. It's that you can't because. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe this. If you really could get all the hostages back and give them 2 months, I don't know. I might take that and then go after them hard after that.
Depends on what you got to exchange for them. There's 125 in a war. The Israelis look. If it was my family, I'd be screaming and yelling. And there's only one Israeli soldier that said, if they capture me, I don't want you to
exchange.
Yeah, I don't want to pay. What do you
ransom?
Ransom. I don't want you to. It's a war. I got caught. The whole country shouldn't pay for that. And it's the same with the hostages. They want special treatment, and I understand that. Your loved ones are there, and they're still alive, and they may not be alive for long. So they're insisting that the government, but that means you're changing your whole behavior. You're fighting Hamas with you can't really fight all out. Because they threaten, if you do that, we'll kill the hostages. That's the trouble with the democracy. You got to listen to the people.
Anyway, we listen to our listeners.
Anyway, sorry to depress you. I'm telling you, don't get depressed.
Now you can go have that Haagen-Dazs double scooper.
Yeah.
See if it works. Now you can trust your advice.
Right.
See if it works. After the depressing discussion of news and world situation, now you can see if it really works.
The trouble is so many Americans are on diets because they overeat all the time. So they can't even enjoy that. But anyway, enjoy the week. Have a great every day of your life. And I look forward to being with you again a week from tonight, next Wednesday at 6:30. And I wish all of you unqualified, immense happiness. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to being with you again next week. Bye-bye.